The morning sun cast long shadows across the front porch of the Mitchell house, where 16-year-old Anna sat watching her father polish his sheriff's badge. It was their Sunday morning ritual, one that had been taking place for as long as she could remember. The smell of coffee drifted through the open windows, mixing with the crisp autumn air of their small town, Cedar Grove. "One day, this badge will mean as much to you as it does to me," Sheriff Mitchell would say, his weathered hands carefully buffing the golden star until it gleamed. Anna would just smile politely, hiding the growing unease in her heart. Her father never noticed how she'd tense up at these words, too absorbed in his own dreams for her future. Cedar Grove wasn't a big town. Everybody knew everybody, and everyone definitely knew the sheriff's family. Living in the White House with green shutters right across from the town square meant Anna grew up under the watchful eyes of the entire community. People would often stop her on the street, telling her how proud she must be of her father, how she was destined to follow in his footsteps. Each time, she'd force a smile and nod, the weight of their expectations pressing heavier on her shoulders. But Anna had her own dreams, ones that took shape during quiet afternoons volunteering at the local youth center. She saw a different side of law enforcement there, kids who were scared of police cars, teenagers who crossed the street when they saw a uniform approaching. Mrs. Rodriguez, who ran the center, had become something of a mentor to Anna, showing her how to help people without a badge or a gun. "Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is listen," Mrs. Rodriguez would say as they helped kids with their homework or organized community events. These words stuck with Anna, becoming her own personal motto, so different from her father's protect and serve. At school, Anna excelled in her social studies classes, particularly when they discussed community services and social work. Her teachers noticed how she'd light up during these discussions, how she'd stay after class to ask questions about careers in counseling and youth advocacy. But she kept these interests hidden from her father, knowing they'd only lead to another lecture about family tradition. The tension at home grew steadily, like a pot slowly coming to boil. Sheriff Mitchell would leave newspaper clippings about police academy scholarships on her desk. Anna's mother, gone 5 years now, would have known how to handle this situation. She'd always been the bridge between father and daughter, understanding both sides of their growing divide. One evening, as Anna helped her father with dinner, his cooking skills hadn't improved much since her mother's passing. She gathered the courage to mention her volunteer work at the youth center. The kitchen fell silent except for the sizzling of onions in the pan. "That's nice, sweetheart," he said, not looking up from the vegetables he was chopping. "It'll look good on your police academy application." Anna's hand tightened around the wooden spoon she was holding. "Dad, not everything I do is about joining the force." The rhythmic chopping stopped. "Of course not. But it's in your blood, Anna. 4 generations of law enforcement, that means something." She stirred the onions with more force than necessary, watching them bounce around the pan. "Maybe it means it's time for a change." Her father set down his knife, turning to face her with that look she'd grown to dread, part disappointment, part determination. "You're young. You don't understand yet how important this legacy is." But she did understand. She understood all too well. She understood every time she saw Tommy Garcia, a classmate, duck his head when police cars drove by, remembering how his father had been roughly arrested in front of him last year. She understood when she helped Lisa Chen at the youth center practice what to say if she was stopped by police, the fear in the young girl's eyes all too real. The next morning, Anna found a stack of police academy brochures on her breakfast plate. She quietly moved them aside and ate her cereal, watching through the window as her father's patrol car pulled out of the driveway. The golden badge on the side caught the morning light, throwing scattered reflections across the kitchen wall. Later that day, as she walked to the youth center, Anna passed Officer Cooper writing a ticket for old Mr. Peterson's truck. The young officer tipped his hat at her, that same hopeful smile he always wore around her. Her father's not-so-subtle attempts at matchmaking weren't lost on her. Officer Cooper represented everything Sheriff Mitchell wanted for his daughter's future. But Anna's heart pulled her in a different direction. She quickened her pace, eager to reach the youth center where a group of kids would be waiting for help with their college applications. This was her calling, not carrying a badge, but carrying hope. Not enforcing laws, but building bridges. As she approached the center, she saw Mrs. Rodriguez setting up for today's activities. The older woman took one look at Anna's face and knew something was weighing on her. "Your father again?" she asked gently, setting out supplies for their afternoon session. Anna nodded, helping to arrange chairs in a circle. "He left more academy brooches this morning. I don't know how to make him understand that's not who I am." Mrs. Rodriguez paused, her wise eyes full of understanding. "Sometimes parents hold so tightly to their dreams for us that they forget to see our own dreams. But the truth always finds its way out, mija. Just be patient and be true to yourself." Anna let these words sink in as she prepared for the afternoon's activities. Outside, a police siren wailed in the distance, and she watched several kids instinctively tense up. In that moment, she knew with absolute certainty that her path would be different from her father's. She might not wear a badge, but she would still serve her community, just in her own way. The summer heat in Cedar Grove had a way of making everything move slower, like honey dripping from a spoon. Even the ceiling fans at Joe's Diner seemed to struggle against the thick air as Anna sat in her usual booth, textbooks spread across the table. She'd been studying for her college entrance exams, deliberately choosing this spot because her father never came here for his coffee runs. Officer Cooper, however, had other ideas. The bell above the door chimed, and Anna didn't need to look up to know it was him. The supple shuffle of police boots and the familiar clearing of his throat gave him away. This was the third time this week he'd accidentally run into her. "Fancy meeting you here," he said, sliding into the booth across from her without waiting for an invitation. His freshly pressed uniform and eager smile reminded Anna of a golden retriever puppy trying too hard to please. She marked her page with a penned cap and looked up. "Officer Cooper, what a surprise." Her tone made it clear it wasn't a surprise at all. "Please call me David," he said, waving to Betty, the waitress, who was already bringing over his usual coffee order. "Your father mentioned you might be here studying." Of course he did, Anna thought. Her father's attempts at matchmaking had gotten less subtle over the past few weeks. Every family dinner seemed to include a story about Officer Cooper's latest heroic deed. How he'd helped Mrs. Wilson's cat down from a tree, or organized a fundraiser for the department's youth sports program. "I'm actually pretty busy right now," Anna said, gesturing to her books. "These college applications won't fill themselves out." Officer Cooper's smile faltered slightly. "College? I thought you were applying to the police academy," your father said. "My father says a lot of things." Anna cut in, then immediately felt bad for snapping. It wasn't Cooper's fault he'd gotten caught in the middle of this family drama. He was just doing what her father asked, like a good deputy should. Betty appeared with a slice of apple pie, setting it between them with 2 forks. "On the house," she said with a wink that made Anna want to sink through the floor. "Look," Anna said, pushing the pie toward Cooper, "you seem like a nice person. But whatever my father's told you about me, about us," she gestured between them, "it's not going to happen." The diner had grown quieter, other customers pretending not to listen while obviously straining to hear every word. In a small town like Cedar Grove, entertainment came in the form of other people's drama, and the sheriff's daughter rejecting his favorite deputy qualified as premium entertainment. Cooper's face reddened, but he maintained his professional composure. "I understand, but maybe we could just be friends. Your father speaks so highly of you, and I'd like to get to know you better. No pressure, no expectations." Anna felt a headache coming on. This was exactly what she'd been trying to avoid, the complicated dance of small-town politics and personal relationships. At the youth center, things were simpler. The kids didn't care about her father's position or the town's expectations. They just needed someone to listen, to understand, to help them navigate their own complicated lives. "Officer Cooper," she said firmly, closing her textbook, "I appreciate the offer, but I need to focus on my future right now. And that future doesn't include law enforcement." He looked genuinely confused. "But your father said you just needed time to come around to the idea. He said it's in your blood." "My blood is my own," Anna replied, stuffing her books into her backpack. "And so are my choices." As she stood to leave, Cooper reached for her arm. "Wait, please. Just give me a chance to." "Everything okay here?" Betty's voice cut through the tension. The waitress stood at their table, coffee pot in hand, her expression making it clear she'd intervened if necessary. Anna gave her a grateful smile. "Everything's fine. I was just leaving." She dropped a few dollars on the table for her earlier coffee and headed for the door, feeling the weight of dozens of eyes following her exit. Outside, the heat hit her like a wall. Anna walked quickly down Main Street, past the courthouse where her father was probably in his office, past the police station where Cooper's patrol car sat empty in its designated spot. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, probably her father, already hearing about what happened at the diner. News traveled fast in Cedar Grove. She found herself walking toward the youth center, even though it was closed today. The old building, with its faded brick and crooked sign, had become her sanctuary. Through the chain-link fence, she could see the basketball court where local kids played pickup games after school. This was where she felt most herself, where she could make a real difference without a badge or a gun. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a text from Mrs. Rodriguez. "Remember, mihija, sometimes saying no is the kindest thing you can do." Anna sat on the steps of the youth center, letting the afternoon sun warm her face. She thought about Officer Cooper's confused expression, her father's well-intentioned but suffocating plans, the weight of the town's expectations. The path she was choosing wouldn't be easy, but at least it would be her own. As if on cue, a police cruiser rolled slowly past the youth center. Anna didn't look up to see if it was Cooper or her father. Instead, she pulled out her college application essays and began writing about why she wanted to become a social worker. The words flowed easily now, fueled by the afternoon's events and her growing certainty about her chosen path. The sun was setting by the time she finished, casting long shadows across her papers. She knew there would be consequences for today's public rejection of Officer Cooper. Her father wouldn't understand, would probably see it as another act of rebellion. But for the first time in a long while, Anna felt truly free, free to be herself, free to choose her own future, free to say no to the life others had planned for her. As she walked home in the gathering dusk, Anna squared her shoulders, ready to face whatever came next. The evening air was thick with the promise of change, and she was finally ready to embrace it. The annual Cedar Grove Summer Festival was in full swing, transforming the town square into a bustling carnival of lights, music, and laughter. Colorful banners stretched between lampposts, and the air was thick with the smell of cotton candy and grilled corn. Anna stood at her youth center booth, helping kids make friendship bracelets, while keeping one eye on the main stage, where her father would soon give his yearly festival speech. "You did such a beautiful job with the booth," Mrs. Rodriguez said, adjusting a poster that showcased their youth programs. The booth walls were covered with photos of smiling kids and testimonials about how the center had helped them. "Your father has to see the good we're doing here." Anna nodded, but her stomach was in knots. She'd spent weeks preparing for this moment, gathering evidence of the center's positive impact on the community. Maybe if her father could see it all laid out like this, he'd finally understand why this work meant so much to her. The festival crowd parted as Officer Cooper approached their booth, looking uncomfortable in his dress uniform despite the evening heat. "Anna," he said, fidgeting with his collar, "your father's asking for you. He wants you up on stage for the announcement." "What announcement?" Anna asked, though she had a sinking feeling she knew exactly what her father was planning. "Just, please come." Cooper's pleading look made him seem younger than his 24 years. Hannah glanced at Mrs. Rodriguez, who gave her an encouraging nod. "Go, mihija. Sometimes we must face these moments head-on." The walk to the stage felt like walking through deep water, each step requiring extra effort. Her father stood at the microphone, his badge catching the festival lights. The crowd had grown, and Anna recognized faces from every corner of their small town, her teachers, neighbors, kids from the youth center, all watching expectantly. And here she is. Sheriff Mitchell's voice boomed through the speakers as Anna climbed the stairs. "My beautiful daughter, Anna." He pulled her close, the scratch of his uniform against her arm bringing back memories of childhood hugs. "Ladies and gentlemen, I have two wonderful announcements tonight. First, it gives me great pride to announce Officer David Cooper's promotion to senior deputy." The crowd erupted in applause. Cooper, who had followed Anna to the stage, stepped forward with a shy wave. Anna's heart began to race as she realized what was coming next. "And second," her father continued, his arm tightening around her shoulders, "I'm thrilled to share that Officer Cooper has expressed his intention to court my daughter with my full blessing." What better match could there be than between Cedar Grove's finest young officer and the daughter who'll soon follow in my footsteps at the academy? The silence that followed felt like glass about to shatter. Anna could see Mrs. Rodriguez in the crowd, her hand pressed to her heart. The kids from the youth center watched with wide eyes, especially little Tommy Garcia, whose father's arrest had sparked Anna's determination to find a different path. No. The word came out softly at first, barely a whisper. What was that sweetheart? Her father asked, still smiling for the crowd. Anna stepped away from his embrace, her voice growing stronger. I said no, Dad. No to the academy, no to Officer Cooper, and no to you making decisions about my life without even asking me. The festival lights seemed to grow brighter, highlighting every face in the crowd as Anna continued, I've tried to tell you so many times, but you never listen. I'm not going to be a police officer. I'm going to college to become a social worker to help kids who need someone in their corner. Anna? Her father warned, reaching for the microphone, but she wasn't finished. Do you know how many kids at the youth center are afraid to walk home when they see a patrol car? Do you know how many families need help, not handcuffs? Her voice cracked with emotion. I've seen how power can corrupt, how badges can become shields to hide behind instead of symbols of protection. Sheriff Mitchell's face had turned a deep red. In one quick motion, he grabbed Anna's arm, spinning her to face him. That's enough. The microphone picked up his words, broadcasting them across the festival grounds. No, it's not enough. Anna pulled free. These people deserve to know the truth. Last month, when the Rivera family store was vandalized, they called for help. But instead of investigating, Officers Mills and Parker accused their son of doing it himself for insurance money. No evidence, just assumptions based on his last name. Anna Mitchell, you stop this right now. Her father's voice thundered without the microphone. Or what about Tommy Garcia's father? Roughly arrested in front of his family for a broken taillight? Is that protecting and serving? The sound of her father's hand striking her face echoed through the speakers, shocking everyone into silence. Anna stumbled backward, her hand rising to her cheek more in surprise than pain. For a moment, time seemed to stop. The festival lights froze, the music died, and even the night breeze held its breath. Officer Cooper stepped forward, his face pale. Sheriff, sir. But Sheriff Mitchell stood frozen, staring at his hand as if it belonged to someone else. In his eyes, Anna saw something crack, not just his authority or his reputation, but the carefully constructed world he built around himself. Mrs. Rodriguez was already moving through the crowd, pushing her way toward the stage. Other people began to move too. Mr. Rivera stepped forward, phone in hand, recording. Tommy Garcia's mother pulled her son close, whispering fiercely in his ear. The paralysis of shock was wearing off, replaced by a low murmur that grew louder with each passing second. Anna straightened her spine, looking directly into her father's eyes. I am not your badge, Dad. I'm your daughter. And if you ever took the time to really see me, you'd know that I found my own way to serve this community, one that doesn't require forcing people into line. With that, she turned and walked off the stage, her steps steady despite her shaking hands. The crowd parted for her like water, faces showing everything from sympathy to shock to quiet approval. Behind her, she could hear her father calling her name, his voice no longer commanding but desperate. But Anna kept walking past the youth center booth where Mrs. Rodriguez quickly fell into step beside her, past the carnival games that had gone quiet, past the fruit stands where vendors watched with open mouths. She walked until the festival lights faded behind her and the summer night wrapped around her like a blanket. Only then did she allow herself to feel the full weight of what had just happened, of bridges burned and truths exposed. But mixed with the pain was something else, a sense of freedom, of finally being able to breathe. The path ahead was uncertain, but at least now it was truly her own. The morning after the festival, Cedar Grove buzzed like an overturned beehive. Anna sat at her Aunt Rose's kitchen table, watching steam rise from a cup of untouched tea while her phone lit up with message after message. Through the window, she could see neighbors slowing down as they passed by, trying to catch a glimpse of what was happening inside. Let them look, Aunt Rose said, pulling fresh banana bread from the oven. The familiar smell filled the kitchen, bringing back memories of childhood hideouts in this very house. They'll find something new to gossip about soon enough. but they both knew this wasn't just ordinary small-town gossip. Mr. Rivera's video of the incident had spread through local social media like wildfire. The local news van had been parked outside the police station since dawn, and reporters from the city were calling anyone who would answer their phones. "Have you watched it?" Anna asked, finally looking up from her tea. Aunt Rose set the bread down and pulled out a chair. "I didn't need to, honey. I've known my brother long enough to know his temper." She reached across the table and squeezed Anna's hand. "Your mother would be proud of you, you know. She always said you had her spirit." The mention of her mother made Anna's eyes sting. "I didn't mean for all this to happen," she whispered. "I just wanted him to listen." A knock at the front door interrupted them. Through the stained glass, they could make out Officer Cooper's uniform. Aunt Rose raised an eyebrow at Anna, who nodded reluctantly. Cooper stepped into the kitchen, his hat in his hands. He looked like he hadn't slept, his usual neat appearance slightly rumpled. "Anna, I came to apologize. I should have spoken up sooner about what's been happening in the department." Anna gestured for him to sit, surprising herself with the invitation. "Why didn't you?" He sank into the chair, placing his hat on the table. "Fear, I guess. Pride, maybe a bit of both. Your father gave me my chance in law enforcement when nobody else would. I felt like I owed him." "And now?" Aunt Rose asked, sliding a slice of banana bread in front of him. "Now I've given a statement to the county commission." He stared at the bread without touching it. "About the Rivera case, about Tommy Garcia's father, about other incidents. They're launching a full investigation." The kitchen fell silent except for the gentle ticking of Aunt Rose's old wall clock. Outside, another car drove by slowly, and Anna could imagine the whispered conversations happening all over town. "Did you hear? Can you believe it? What's going to happen to the sheriff?" Her phone buzzed again, Mrs. Rodriguez this time. "The kids at the center are asking about you. Come when you're ready. We're here." Anna felt tears welling up again, but these were different from the ones she'd cried last night. These felt like release, like rain after a long drought. "You should see the youth center today," Cooper said, finally picking up his bread. "Kids have been bringing flowers all morning. Their parents, too. Even old Mr. Peterson left his famous apple pie." "Really?" Anna looked up, surprised. "Really? Turns out you're not the only one who's been wanting things to change." He stood up, straightening his uniform. "I should go. The commission wants to interview all officers today." "But Anna, thank you. Sometimes it takes one person's courage to help others find theirs." After he left, Aunt Rose started humming as she wrapped up the banana bread. It was an old lullaby, one Anna's mother used to sing. "Your father came by this morning, before you woke up," she said casually. Anna's heart jumped. "What did he want?" "To make sure you were safe. He looked terrible, like he'd aged 10 years overnight." Aunt Rose turned, her eyes soft with concern for both her brother and her niece. "He's been suspended pending the investigation." The news hit Anna like a physical weight. Despite everything, she never wanted this. "Maybe I should talk to him." "Not yet, honey. Give it time. Some wounds need air to heal." Throughout the day, more visitors came to Aunt Rose's door. Mrs. Rivera brought homemade tamales and tears of gratitude. Tommy Garcia's mother stopped by with a hand-drawn card from her son. Even Betty from the diner delivered a fresh apple pie, saying simply, "We all saw. We all remember." As evening approached, Anna sat on her aunt's front porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. Her phone showed missed calls from her father, but also dozens of messages of support from unexpected places, former classmates, parents of kids from the center, teachers who had suspected but never spoken up. The local news at 6 led with the story. Cedar Grove Police Department under investigation. They showed clips from the festival, interviews with townspeople, statements from the county commission. But what caught Anna's attention were the shots of the youth center, its steps covered in flowers, cards, and food from the community. The camera panned to show kids and parents gathering there, some holding signs about change and justice. Mrs. Rodriguez appeared on screen, her voice steady. "What happened here isn't just about one incident or one family. It's about a community finally finding its voice. And it started because a young woman was brave enough to speak her truth." Anna clicked off the TV and stepped outside again. The evening air was cooling, carrying the scent of Aunt Rose's garden. Down the street, she could see lights on in houses where families were surely discussing the day's events. Cedar Grove felt different somehow, like a town waking up from a long sleep. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Chief Williams from the County Commission. When you're ready, we'd like to hear your full story." Anna looked at the message for a long moment, then began to type. "I'll come tomorrow. There's a lot we need to talk about." Inside, she could hear Aunt Rose on the phone, probably with another concerned friend or neighbor. The banana bread smell still lingered in the kitchen. On the porch steps, Anna hugged her knees to her chest and watched the first stars appear in the darkening sky. Everything had changed, yet somehow, sitting here in the growing dark, she felt more at home than ever before. The County Commission building stood tall and gray against the morning sky, its windows reflecting the clouds above. Anna smoothed her blouse for the 10th time as she walked up the steps, her aunt's words echoing in her mind. "Just tell the truth, honey. That's all anyone can ask of you." Inside, Chief Williams' office felt smaller than she'd imagined. The woman herself sat behind a desk covered in files, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, reading glasses perched on her nose. "Thank you for coming, Miss Mitchell," she said, gesturing to a chair. "I know this isn't easy." For the next 2 hours, Anna spoke about everything she'd seen and heard over the years. She talked about the Rivera case, about Tommy Garcia's father, about other incidents she'd witnessed through her work at the youth center. Her voice grew stronger with each story, each memory. "And Officer Cooper?" Chief Williams asked, making notes. "He's confirmed much of what you're telling us." "He's a good person who got caught in a bad system," Anna replied, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "He wanted to help people. That's why he became an officer in the first place." The chief nodded, then pulled out a tablet. "We've received this footage from last week's festival. Are you comfortable discussing what happened?" Anna watched the scene play out on the screen, her father's announcement, her speech, the moment his hand struck her face. It felt like watching a movie about someone else's life. "My father." Anna paused, choosing her words carefully. "He's not an evil man." But somewhere along the way, he forgot the difference between power and responsibility. Outside the office, phones rang and voices murmured as the investigation continued. Anna could hear Officer Cooper being interviewed in another room, his voice carrying through the thin walls as he detailed incidents he'd witnessed. By afternoon, the story had grown bigger than Cedar Grove. Regional news vans lined the streets, and Anna's phone buzzed constantly with messages from reporters seeking comments. But it was a text from Mrs. Rodriguez that caught her attention. "The Rivera family's son got accepted to college today. He says your courage gave him courage." That evening, as Anna left the commission building, she found Officer Cooper waiting by his personal car, out of uniform for the first time she could remember. "Need a ride?" he offered. The drive back to Cedar Grove was quiet at first, both of them lost in thought. Finally, Cooper spoke. "Your father's been calling me all day. He's not taking this well." Anna watched the familiar landscape roll past. How could he? Everything he believed in is being questioned. "Not everything," Cooper said softly. "He keeps asking if you're okay. That's all he really wants to know." They passed the youth center, where kids were playing basketball despite the late hour. Some waved at Anna, and she waved back, noticing how they didn't flinch at the sight of Cooper's car now that it wasn't a patrol vehicle. "What will you do now?" Anna asked him. Cooper drummed his fingers on the steering wheel. "Chief Williams offered me a position with the county, working on community relations reform. She says we need officers who understand what went wrong and want to fix it." The sun was setting as they pulled up to Aunt Rose's house. Anna could smell dinner cooking, her aunt's famous lasagna, the comfort food she always made during difficult times. "You should take the job," Anna said as she got out. "Change has to start somewhere." That night, as Anna helped her aunt wash dishes, the evening news played in the background. The investigation was the lead story again, but this time they focused on the broader implications. Other small towns looking into their police departments, community organizations gaining confidence to speak up. "Your father called again," Aunt Rose said, drying a plate. "He left this for you." She handed Anna an envelope, worn at the edges like it had been carried around for a while. Inside was a photograph Anna had never seen before, her mother in her social worker's office, surrounded by children's drawings and thank you notes. On the back, in her father's handwriting, "She always knew how to help people in her own way, just like you." Anna sat at the kitchen table, staring at the photo while Aunt Rose made tea. The house felt quiet despite the TV's continued murmur about investigations and reform. Her phone lit up with a message from Chief Williams. "Tomorrow we're interviewing your father. He's requested that you be present, not as a witness, but as his daughter. The choice is yours." Anna looked at the photo again, at her mother's kind eyes and gentle smile. She thought about her father's face at the festival, the moment he realized what he'd done. She thought about Officer Cooper choosing a new path, about the Rivera family's son going to college, about Tommy Garcia playing basketball without fear. "What are you thinking about?" Aunt Rose asked, setting a steaming mug in front of her. "About how change doesn't always come the way we expect it to," Anna replied. "And about tomorrow. And I think..." Anna took a deep breath. "I think it's time to face this together. All of it, the good and the bad." The kitchen clock ticked steadily as aunt and niece sat in comfortable silence. Outside, crickets chirped their evening song, and somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, not a police siren this time, but an ambulance rushing to help someone in need. Anna typed a reply to Chief Williams. "I'll be there. Some stories need to be heard by everyone involved." She glanced at her mother's photo one more time before heading up to bed. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but for the first time since the festival, Anna felt ready to face them. Not just as the sheriff's daughter or as a youth center volunteer, but as someone who had finally found her own voice and helped others find theirs too. The waiting room at the county commission felt colder than usual. Anna watched her father through the glass walls of the interview room, noticing how his uniform seemed to hang loosely on his frame. 2 weeks of suspension had aged him visibly. His hair looked grayer, his shoulders more rounded. He sat alone at the table, staring at his hands, waiting. "Are you ready?" Chief Williams asked, touching Anna's shoulder gently. Anna nodded, clutching her mother's photograph like a shield. As they entered the room, her father looked up, and for a moment she saw something flash across his face, not the anger she'd feared, but something that looked almost like relief. "Anna," he said softly, starting to stand. "Please remain seated, Sheriff Mitchell," Chief Williams instructed, but her tone was kind. "We're here to understand, not to judge." What followed was unlike any conversation Anna had ever had with her father. Under the fluorescent lights, with recording devices capturing every word, they began to unravel years of misunderstanding. "Tell me about Mom," Anna said suddenly, sliding the photograph across the table. "Tell me what happened after she died." Her father picked up the photo with trembling hands. "Your mother, she always saw the best in people. Even the ones I'd arrested multiple times. She'd say, 'They're not their worst mistakes, Jim.'" He cleared his throat. "When we lost her, I couldn't bear the thought of losing you too. I thought if I could control everything, keep everyone in line. You could keep me safe," Anna finished. "But Dad, safety isn't just about law and order. Mom knew that." Chief Williams sat quietly, taking notes but letting the conversation flow naturally. Outside the room, other officers and commission members paused their work, watching the scene unfold. "The night your mother died," her father continued, his voice barely above a whisper, "it wasn't a random accident like I told everyone. She was trying to help one of her clients escape an abusive situation. The man followed them." He stopped, taking a shaky breath. "I wasn't there to protect her. I was too busy doing a routine traffic stop, writing tickets to meet my quota." Anna felt tears rolling down her cheeks. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I was ashamed. After that, I convinced myself that strict law enforcement was the only way to prevent tragedies. I forgot what your mother always said, that sometimes people need help more than they need handcuffs." Through the glass walls, Anna could see Officer Cooper arriving for his own interview, now wearing a county uniform. He caught her eye and nodded respectfully before being led to another room. "When I saw you at the youth center," her father said, "working with those kids, showing them kindness instead of suspicion, you looked so much like her. It terrified me. I thought I was seeing history repeat itself." "So you tried to push me onto a different path," Anna said, understanding dawning. "But Dad, I'm not Mom. And I'm not you either." I have to find my own way to help people. Chief Williams cleared her throat softly. Sheriff Mitchell, the commission has reviewed all the evidence, including Officer Cooper's testimony and the community statements. We're prepared to offer you a choice. Anna watched her father straighten in his chair, the old authority trying to reassert itself. You can retire with partial pension, Chief Williams continued, or you can join our new community outreach program. Work with your daughter, not against her. Help us rebuild trust between law enforcement and the people they serve. The silence that followed felt heavy with possibility. Through the window, Anna could see the sun breaking through the clouds, casting patterns on the floor. There's something else you should know, Anna said, pulling out her phone. She showed her father a text from Mrs. Rodriguez. The Youth Center Board voted last night. They want to create a new position, Community Relations Director. They're offering it to you, Anna. Her father looked at the message, then at his daughter, really seeing her perhaps for the first time. You found your path, he said quietly, just like your mother did. Maybe, Anna replied, reaching across the table to take his hand, we can find a new path together. Later that evening, Anna and her father sat on Aunt Rose's porch swing, watching the sunset. He'd changed into civilian clothes, the first time Anna could remember seeing him out of uniform in years. I spoke to Cooper after the interviews, he said, rocking the swing gently. He's doing good work with the county, helping them understand where we went wrong, how to do better. And you? Anna asked. Have you decided what you're going to do? Her father was quiet for a moment, watching a group of kids ride their bikes past the house. They waved at Anna, and after a slight hesitation, at him too. I think, he said slowly, it's time I learned how to help people your mother's way. Our way. He turned to look at her. If you'll help me learn. Inside, they could hear Aunt Rose humming their mother's favorite song as she prepared dinner. The evening air was warm and sweet with the scent of summer flowers. For the first time in years, Anna felt like she could see her father clearly, not as the stern sheriff, but as a man trying to find his way back to who he used to be. We all need help sometimes, she said, echoing words she'd heard her mother say long ago. Even the ones who seemed the strongest. Her father squeezed her hand, and together they watched the sun sink below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of hope. 6 months had passed since the summer festival that changed everything in Cedar Grove. The youth center buzzed with activity as Anna hummed the last of the Christmas decorations, watching snow fall gently outside the windows. Kids sprawled across couches and floor cushions, working on homework or chatting about their day. In the corner, her father sat with Tommy Garcia, helping him prepare for his college interviews. Your experiences matter, she heard her father saying. Don't be afraid to tell your story. The irony of those words coming from the former sheriff wasn't lost on Anna. She smiled, remembering how far they'd all come. The door chimed as Officer Cooper, now Deputy Commissioner Cooper, entered, stamping snow from his boots. He carried a box of donated books for the center's new library program. Special delivery, he called out, setting the box down. The kids barely glanced up, no longer tensing at the sight of a uniform. That alone felt like victory. How's the new Community Oversight Committee coming along? Anna asked, helping him unpack the books. Better than expected, Cooper replied. Your father's insights have been invaluable. Who would have thought the old sheriff would become our strongest advocate for reform? Anna watched her father demonstrate proper interview posture to Tommy, both of them laughing at something she couldn't hear. People can surprise you, she said softly. The youth center had transformed over the past months. What started as a safe space for kids had grown into a bridge between law enforcement and the community. Weekly meetings brought together officers, families, and young people to talk openly about their concerns and hopes. Anna's new position as Community Relations Director kept her busy, but the work felt right in a way that nothing else had before. Mrs. Rodriguez appeared at her elbow, carrying a tray of hot chocolate. Look who's here, she nodded toward the door. The Rivera family stood in the entrance, their son proudly wearing his new college sweater. He just finished his first semester, coming home for winter break with stories of campus life and dreams of becoming a lawyer. Behind them, more families filed in for the evening's community meeting. Ready? Mrs. Rodriguez asked, squeezing Anna's hand. Anna nodded, moving to the front of the room. The familiar faces turned toward her. Parents who once avoided eye contact with police now sat comfortably beside officers in civilian clothes. Kids who used to run from authority now raised their hands to share ideas about improving their town. "Welcome, everyone," Anna began, her voice steady and warm. "Tonight, we're here to celebrate 6 months of change and to plan for the future we want to build together." Her father stood up, moving to join her at the front. He no longer wore his uniform, instead choosing casual clothes that made him look more approachable, more human. The badge that once defined him had been replaced by something stronger, respect earned through humility and growth. "Before we start," he said, "I'd like to share something." He pulled out an old photograph. Anna recognized it as the one of her mother in her office. "This woman taught me something I forgot for a long time. She taught me that true strength isn't about power over others. It's about lifting each other up." The room fell quiet, everyone listening intently. Even the youngest kids seemed to sense the importance of the moment. "My daughter reminded me of that lesson," he continued, his voice thick with emotion. "She showed me that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is admit we were wrong and try to do better." Anna felt tears pricking at her eyes, but these were different from the ones she'd shed 6 months ago. These were tears of pride, of hope, of possibility. Officer Cooper stood next, sharing updates on the county's new training programs. The Rivera family's son spoke about his experiences at college, encouraging other young people to chase their dreams. Tommy Garcia's mother announced a new scholarship fund for kids who wanted to study criminal justice or social work. As the meeting continued, Anna looked around the room, taking in all the small miracles. Old Mr. Peterson, who used to complain about those troublemaker kids, now volunteered as a math tutor. Betty from the diner had started a weekend meal program for families in need. Even the town council had changed, with new members representing voices that had long gone unheard. Later that evening, as people began to leave, Anna found herself standing at the window with her father, watching the snow fall. "Your mother would be proud," he said, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Of both of us, I think." Anna leaned into his embrace, remembering how impossible this moment would have seemed 6 months ago. "We still have work to do," she said. "We do," he agreed. "But now we know how to do it together." Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering Cedar Grove in a clean white blanket. Children's laughter echoed from the basketball court, where some kids were trying to catch snowflakes on their tongues. A police car drove past slowly, the officer inside waving at the kids instead of watching them with suspicion. Mrs. Rodriguez joined them at the window, holding out fresh cups of hot chocolate. "You know what I think?" she said, smiling at the scene outside. "I think this is just the beginning." Anna took the warm cup, feeling its heat seep into her hands. She thought about all the stories that had led them here, her mother's legacy, her father's transformation, her own journey to find her voice. She thought about Tommy preparing for college interviews, about the Rivera family's son studying law, about Officer Cooper training a new generation of police officers to serve their community with compassion. The beginning of what? Her father asked Mrs. Rodriguez. The older woman's eyes twinkled. Of the story we're all writing together. Anna looked around the youth center one last time before they closed for the night. The Christmas lights twinkled, casting a warm glow over the college brochures, community announcements, and children's artwork that covered the walls. Among them hung a framed photograph of her mother, smiling down at them all. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to bridge divides and heal old wounds. But tonight, in this moment, Anna felt the truth of Mrs. Rodriguez's words. This wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. And for the first time in her life, she knew exactly where she belonged.